Serious, what was the dirtiest trick ever pulled in the history of war? During the Second World War, German forces would rig crooked wall paintings to explode when straightened with hopes that it would kill Allied officers when they came in to set up command posts. The logic being that Private Joe Blow clearing the building, looking for enemies isn't going to care, or even notice if a painting is askew. But General Robert Important Guy who sets up his new command post in the building and is in his office for hours probably would. The Germans also strung piano wire across roads to take out anyone riding by in a jeep. When Timur the Lame was about to attack the city of Shivas, he promised the 3,000 Christian Armenian Sipais that he would not shed any of their blood if they surrendered. They did, and, true to his word, he had them all buried alive. In World War I the Allies became used to the smell of chemical weapons and would put their gas masks on quickly. The Germans changed their tactics and would use nearly odorless vomit-inducing chemicals that would absorb quickly into the lungs first. Then, once soldiers were vomiting and couldn't keep their gas masks on, they would fire the main artillery barrage containing the lethal chemicals. I feel like the Great War was the worst war of them all. Conventional weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, bloody muddy trenches, getting clubbed in the face as if it were medieval times. Yeah, not good. All wars following have been more about ideologies and principles, not saying wars since have been any better or worse, but at least World War II had a reason to fight Germany. The actor George Sanders found out that his friend, David Niven, was very chummy with Winston Churchill during the war. He asked Niven to give the Prime Minister a note detailing his idea for a new bomb that the RAF could drop on German cities. It would be exactly the same as all the old bombs except it would have a wind-activated siren attached to it. So when the bombs dropped, the German civilian population hiding in shelters would hear the siren, think that the all-clear was being sounded and come out, just as the bombs hit. Niven didn't say how Churchill took the idea. Not sure if this counts as a trick, but Napoleon prior to the Battle of Marengo. Not only did he cross the Alps with his entire army, a completely unexpected move, but once across, the Austrians thought Napoleon would move to Genoa in order to relieve the siege of that city. Thousands were dying of starvation, and French General Massena desperately called for Napoleon's aid. Napoleon, in a ruthless and surprising move, ignored the calls for help and instead moved to attack the main portion of the Austrian army, eventually winning the Battle of Marengo. Massena surrendered Genoa and it would be years before he eventually forgave Napoleon for abandoning him, and it would be years before Napoleon forgave Massena for surrendering. Counter-terrorism and anti-crime units have been seeding black market arms dealers with C4 explosive-laced ammo. When fired, the bullets tend to have a small exploding effect on the weapons, rendering the weapon useless, and typically giving the user non-lethal but disfiguring hand and facial injuries. This bad ammo looks and feels like every other bullet that the dealer has sold, so the only solution is to stop using that arms dealer. Now you can't trust your existing arms dealer, and you have to find a new one that may or may not have tainted ammo, or even be a Fed. In essence, it shuts down an entire illegal arms industry at the cost of about 1 or 2 crates of C4 bullets mixed in with the others. The British pulled a dirty trick during the African campaign in World War II. At every well and oasis they could find they hung a sign that said danger. Poison. In English and German. It was only when the Germans complained that poisoning wells was a war crime that the British pointed out that yes, poisoning wells was a crime, but merely hanging signs was not. The water was perfectly drinkable. Edit. I've had a bunch of requests for sources, but I cannot for the life of me find where I read it originally. The closest references I can find are to the British creating fake minefields out of nothing but signs in the Second Boer War, and some very impressive British World War II camouflage in Operation Bertram. According to some records in the art of war, it is considered a good strategy to corner your men and have the enemy attempt to wipe them out, because when the only means of escape/survival is through the enemy, then your own men will fight to the death. The Russians and their use of a scorched earth policy. I can't think of a better way to flip off your invaders than ruining all your own, so when they do take it, it's worthless. Not only that, but the land itself is just too cold. So go ahead, take the land. You will just freeze to death. Congratulations. Belgians did something similar in World War I. When the Germans were pushing north trying to find a French flank to exploit, they continually pushed the Belgian forces back until the King of Belgium decided to do something desperate. He opened the Belgian dikes in the Battle of the Yser. This basically flooded a huge portion of Belgium's fertile farmland but also effectively cut off the German advance and allowed the French army and British Expeditionary Force to seal off the front. For the rest of the war, the Belgian king and his army basically flipped off the Germans from across the water.